A fellow by the name of Robert Lawrence Kuhn, who has written fairly extensively on what he calls the 9 levels of nothingness. And I've printed part of one of his articles in the bulletin for you today. Take something like a box. And you say, well, this box is empty. There's nothing in it. And Robert Kuhn would say, well, maybe not. And, Kuhn isn't just a philosopher. This isn't just a word game or a thought experiment to him. He's also a physicist. And he takes his work very seriously, and physicists have taken his work very seriously. Now, under an ordinary definition, we say, yes, this box is empty because it has no visible objects in it. The second level of emptiness is that you remove all air and pollutants and aromas, atoms, neutrinos, and so on from the box. But there's a third level. You can get this box emptier yet. You can remove all energy from it. All heat, sound, motion, light, electricity, gravity waves, fields. At the fourth level, you can remove from this box space and time. At the fifth level, you can remove the laws of quantum mechanics so that there are no virtual particles, no antiparticles, no antimatter, no dark energy, no dark matter. At the sixth level, you can remove the pre-existing laws of physics that could spontaneously generate time or space-time or mass energy in a space like this. At the seventh level, you could remove all non-physical phenomenology, all thought, consciousness, perception, sight, hearing, perspective, knowledge, intellect, recognition, awareness, is, ought, and spirits or entities of any kind. At the eighth level, you can also then remove numbers, sets, logic, propositions, universals, Platonic forms, values, theoretical or otherwise. But then you come to the ninth level. And at this level, even Kuhn pauses. It says, you take all of those things out of this box, one thing remains. Possibilities. A box that's completely empty, a space that's completely empty, still has possibilities in it. And at this level, Kuhn really struggles because he says, I don't know how to remove possibility. I don't know if you can make that box truly empty. That's the last possible thing. The box would be truly empty. No one can really even theorize about how to remove possibility from it. Now, I like that. It's kind of the way I tend to think. People think that I'm someone who thinks outside the box. I'm not. I'm someone who thinks of the possibilities inside the box. When I approach anything, and this is one of the things that was so confounding to my professors when I was working on my doctoral thesis, and one of the things that confounded but impressed, and I'm not bragging on myself, but it impressed my examiners when I went for my viva for my doctoral thesis. Was they said, they told me you don't think like anyone else we've examined. That's because when I'm presented with a question, for instance, about what does this word mean, I don't start with what it ought to mean. I start with what's possible. And I raise all the possibilities. And until I've exhausted that list, until I've exhausted all the possibilities, I don't start eliminating things. I don't then go in and say, well, it ought to mean this. I've got to have a rationale for why it ought to mean that. Now, there are limits to that kind of thinking, and I'll be getting to that in a few minutes. The question is, how does this apply to us? Well, it's pretty simple, really, because here we are in this box, in this church building. And, it's a pretty good box. As a matter of fact, with the renovations that we've made over the last couple of years, it's a really very nice box indeed. The new roof and new siding, new windows, new doors, we're doing pretty good. But for most practical means and purposes, this box is empty most of the time. That's at first level emptiness. But no matter how empty this box gets, there's a level of emptiness that it cannot surpass. You can remove everything you can remove from this space, take it all away, and it still contains one thing: possibility. I find that interesting. Before we arrive, the church building is empty except for possibility. And then we arrive, and because we're here and we're gathered together and there are two or more of us, then God is here. And according to Matthew 19:26, with God, all things are possible. So there's a sense in which anything could happen here. But we don't want just anything to happen. We want God's will to happen. And that's getting closer to what I want to talk about this morning. You see, I don't know. And I doubt anyone else would claim to know if they thought about it very carefully. I don't know what God's will for this church is. I could presume a couple things. I can see from the fact that the box is mostly empty most of the time that the possibilities are enormous. And I know that God's will for his church in general is that it should grow. And with this in mind, it occurred to me some time ago that the time is nigh for us to take inventory of our possibilities here at the Steamboat Church of Christ. Something I've been thinking about. It was something I was ready, I thought, to move on, something I was ready to take action on just before COVID hit. And so those actions have been delayed by a couple of years. But for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been thinking and praying about this. And eventually I discerned that it was time to move forward with what I'm calling Together Again for the first time. We're on January 8th, one of the things that's going to be occupying this space that hasn't been occupying it is certain people. That's certainly our hope, that there are people who have been listening to our radio messages for the last 13 years, or for any number of years over the 13 years we've been broadcasting, and that they'll be motivated to respond, that they'll be motivated to come and be part of this congregation that's been feeding them for so long. These aren't just any people. These are the people who have ears to hear and eyes to see. But with them come a lot of unknowns, because I'm praying that these people are coming, and I know that you guys are all praying too, that they're coming. But I don't know who they are, or how many of them there will be, or where they will be in their walks of faith. And I don't know what they'll be bringing in their hands. I don't know what they have to offer, because whether they know it or not, every person who walks through that door with the intention of serving the Lord as a member of the Steamboat Church of Christ populates this box with possibility. But at this point, I don't have any idea what those possibilities are. And when they get here, I don't know yet what I'm going to say to them. I don't know yet how I'm going to lead them. I don't know yet what direction I'm going to lead them on the 8th or the 15th or the 22nd or the 29th. I simply can't plan that out. And that frustrates the fool out of me. You know how it is that I usually preach, and I'm not preaching that way this morning. I've got some notes here in front of me, but usually my sermons are extremely well researched. I've been very, very careful in picking my words. I've written out a manuscript. I follow the manuscript very closely. And over the last few weeks, God seems to have done one thing and another to try to get me to wean myself off my manuscript. It's been motivating me to study harder than I've ever studied before for sermons. Now, for me, my preferred method of studying is listening to lectures or watching lectures. And I'm doing that about 4 hours a day these days. And the lectures that I'm listening to, the lectures that I'm watching, the lectures that I'm taking in are every bit as dense as my sermons are. I mean, can you imagine listening to 8 of my sermons every day? You would need therapy if you tried to do that on a sustained basis. But one of the reasons I'm doing that is because I'm internalizing things in a way that I've never internalized them before. And I'm internalizing them with a different goal in mind. Not for what I'm going to write down and say to you, but for what I have access to that's within me that I can pull up and just say. Because it's become part of me, because I've internalized it, because it's something to which I have access. So I'm going to be weaning myself more and more over the next few weeks off of my manuscript, and I want to be ready come January 8th to say the right words. But that readiness has to take a different form, because there's no way to know in advance what the right words are. No way until I meet the people who are coming, till I shake their hands and look them in the eye and listen to what the Holy Spirit is trying to tell me about what their needs are. You know, when I gave my first sermon about this event a few weeks ago, I told you I have a plan. Don't worry. I've got a plan, and I do. I got a plan to get us to the 8th. I don't have any idea what I'm going to do come the 8th. I have the beginning of a plan. Before we get to the 8th, we need to make a thoroughgoing assessment of what is, of what we have, of what our possibilities are right now. And here I want to offer an experience to you from my own life as a cautionary tale against presuming to know what those possibilities might be, about putting the ought before the is. One of the people I've been listening to a lot lately is Jordan Peterson, and Peterson is a tremendous student of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And as a matter of fact, when they recently celebrated, I guess, what was the 70th anniversary or the 60th anniversary of the publishing of the Gulag Archipelago, they asked Jordan Peterson to write the foreword to the book. And I haven't read that book, but Emily and I are heading out of town on vacation today, and I've got it queued up. I bought the audio book. Yeah, good luck with that. We're not going to finish it on this trip. It's 80 hours. Yeah, we'll get a quarter of the way through it at best on this trip. But one of the things that Jordan consistently says about Solzhenitsyn is that here he was, and he found himself in one of these hellish death camps, one of these gulags in Soviet Russia. And he started asking himself questions. And one of the questions that he decided to focus on was, what did I do to get myself here? Now, if you know Solzhenitsyn's story, you know that may sound like a self-indulgent question. It may sound even kind of neurotic. Because, who's to blame for him being in the Gulag in the first place? Well, you could start with Hitler and Stalin and maybe go from there. And they did an awful lot to cause his life circumstances to be as they were. But he wasn't interested in that. He knew that. Everyone knew that. He wanted to know, well, what did I do? How did I contribute to this situation? And he figured out over the years of being in the Gulag and of writing that he was more responsible for his own circumstances than he thought. There's something that happened to me about 4 years ago now that I've been dwelling on for that 4 years. And I'm just going to touch on the story. I don't want to get into the details of it. But in May of 2018, we did a performance here in Steamboat Springs of um, a Requiem Mass in Latin that I had written entitled Obscuri Lateris Illuminati. It was a choral response to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It was the biggest thing that the Yampa Valley Choral Society had ever done. It was the largest expenditure, the biggest risk venture we had ever taken. And I think it cost $31,000 or $32,000 to put this event on. And I think we made $32,300. I mean, we broke even and then made just a little bit of profit on that, but it was a big risk. And this was kind of the culmination of 9 or 10 years of work that I had been doing with the Yampa Valley Choral Society. You see, people in this valley have been singing in choral groups and various singing groups forever, for a long time. And you can trace those efforts back for decades to find the different community choruses and choirs and groups that have sung over the years. But when I moved to town in 2008, it suddenly presented itself as that it was time for those efforts to be codified, for them to be made official. And so that's what I did. I did not begin the choral activities that go on in this valley, but I am the founder of the Yampa Valley Choral Society. I'm the one who called the people together, called those meetings, said, let's organize, let's have a board, let's have bylaws, let's do things by Robert's rules, let's incorporate, let's get our 501c3 status, let's have a bank account, let's be copyright compliant, let's do this by the books, let's do it officially, let's have different organizations for each of the choirs and let them be under the umbrella of the Yampa Valley Choral Society. And over 9 or 10 years, then built that into a larger organization that at some points has had as many as 7 distinct singing groups in it. And when we did the Obscuri, that was, as far as choral music is concerned, that was the zenith for me. That was the high point. That was the absolute triumph of writing something and producing it and having a choir to sing it and being allowed to direct it and being able to have access to the funds to get it going. And then through much prayer and hard work to be able to turn a small profit with it. And came out of that concert, just truly feeling triumphant. At that point, I didn't know that 8 months later, I would have the most publicly embarrassing event of my life, the least good performance ever put on by the Yampa Valley Choral Society that I would be in charge of. Now, there were a number of things that went into that. After doing the Obscuri, they asked me to direct the Yampa Valley Singers for a season. And this is the Y'all Come choir. You don't have to be able to sing to be in this choir. And we're there for fun and for music and for community. And when they asked me to do it, I very quickly said yes. And the reason for that was because I already had a plan. I had a concert that I'd been working out in my head that I thought, well, if I ever get a chance to direct, the regular choir. This is the concert I want to do. And I've been building this program in my head for years. The name of the program was Better to Have Loved. And it was all songs about the difficulties of love relationships and of people coming together and then being separated, of betrayal and of heartbreak and of loneliness. And I had this tremendous ideas for this narrative that would weave all of these things together. And these powerful songs, Miserere by Zucchero, All Star by Smash Mouth, Uninvited by Alanis Morissette, Creep by Radiohead, These Eyes by the Guess Who, These Boots Are Made for Walking, Nancy Sinatra, Famous Blue Raincoat, Leonard Cohen, Needing and Getting by OK Go, Forget You by CeeLo Green, Somebody That I Used to Know by Gyote, Fight Song by Rachel Platten, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, and then ending with Nessun Dorma by Puccini. Now I knew at heart that this is not the concert that the members of the Yampa Valley Choral Society would love to sing, that this would be a real challenge for them. They were much more used to a much lighter fare, happier music, just a whole different kind of experience. But as I was getting ready for that fall season, I went on Facebook and I started talking to people about what I wanted to do with this season. And over the course of that summer, I recruited 50 new singers, which is more people than we had in that choir in the first place. I recruited 50 new singers, all of whom wanted to come on the strength of the program that I had put together. They said, yes, I would love to sing those songs. Yes, I want to do that. Now, that would have been marvelous if they had come. It would have been doable if half of them had come, if even 25 of the new singers had showed up. Could have even pulled it off with a lot of work if 8 of the new singers had followed through on their commitment and showed up. But they didn't come. The number of the new singers who actually showed up and sang was 0. And when I presented this concert to sing to the present members of the Yampa Valley Singers, they said, oh, no, no, this is not for us. This is not what we want to do. And after that, a number of other things went wrong. And there were lots of reasons why my enthusiasm for what we ended up doing, because we ended up picking a whole new concert of music that I didn't particularly want to do. And I didn't put my full effort into it. But there were a number of other things going on that I don't want to go into with this morning's lesson. But everything fell apart. And we had the worst concert we've ever had. And I directed it. Now, what did I do wrong? Now, I've told this story 100 times to a number of people. I know what everyone else did wrong. I can tell you that. I can tell you that in great, gory detail, what everyone else did wrong, but that's not a useful question for today's purposes. The useful question is, what did I do wrong? It's a question I've been thinking about for 4 years. I don't know if I've got the full answer to it yet, but one of the answers is I bet on the future without taking proper stock of the present. Every box, no matter how empty, contains possibilities. But no box in any arena of your life contains all possibilities. Yes, according to Jesus in Matthew 19:26, with God, all things are possible, but that doesn't mean that all possibilities are present everywhere, all the time. You've got to start with the possibilities that are present. You've got to start with the possibilities that have actually been presented. Then you've got to discern which possibilities are being presented by God. In Genesis 12:1, it says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee." And we see Abram then going to the Lord over and over. He prays, or he worships, he offers a sacrifice, but he goes and he consults with the Lord. And then he goes out and has an adventure of some kind. And then he comes back and he consults again. We see the original calling when he leaves Haran and then goes to Canaan. Well, that was a possibility. It was a possibility directed by God. He did that right. And then in 12:7 through 8, he's back at the altar. And then there's famine in the land. So he makes the sojourn to Egypt. That was a possibility. And he lived into that possibility. But then while he was there, he engaged in some treachery, lied to Pharaoh, said Sarah is my sister. And with this misadventure of his, he actually profited from it. He got rich by exploiting his wife in this way. Well, that was a possibility. Was that presented to him by God? Seems unlikely. Then in 13:4, he's back at the altar. He separates himself from Lot. That was a possibility that presented itself. Was it from God? I don't know. And then Lot is kidnapped. And we have the War of the Nine Kings, in which Abram goes in and cleans house and takes over all of Canaan. Abraham becomes the king of Canaan. He becomes the overlord of 9 kingdoms in Canaan. That was a possibility. It was presented to him by God. It seems so, because on the way back from that war, he encounters Melchizedek in chapter 14 of Genesis. And Melchizedek, who's a type of Christ, blesses him for what he's done and what he's going to do. And then he was presented with the opportunity to be rewarded, to have spoils from that war. And he rejected that possibility. He said, no, this isn't from God. He was able to discern that one and say, no one gets to say they made Abraham rich. No one, except God alone. And then comes chapter 15 of the book of Genesis. And Sarah and Abraham's plan to conceive Ishmael. Well, we know that that wasn't presented by God. That was presented from outside the box. Abraham bit, and he had to pay the consequences for it. That's kind of what I did with the Better to Have Loved concert. I was pretty familiar with the possibilities on the inside of the box, but frustrated with the limitations. I knew what the possibilities were, but I just didn't like them. So I dreamt up other possibilities. Possibilities that I thought I was capable of, and I ignored the fact that this was not on the table. This was not in the imagination. This was not in the visionary field of the members of that group. Sarah said to Abraham, "Go and make a child. When he's born, he'll fall into my lap, and I will love him as my own." But she didn't mean it. Well, she may have meant it, but she was deceiving herself. Likewise, the Yampa Valley Singers gave me artistic freedom. But they never imagined that 3 months later I'd walk in and say, "Congratulations, it's a boy." And guess what? Bonus, he can already walk and talk, and he has a personality of his own. No. That was a painful mistake. But it's a mistake I don't plan to make again. When I conceived of Together Again for the first time, I started with the possibilities that are present. We've been sowing the word through our radio messages for 13 years. We have the possibility given to us by God of reaping the harvest for that. It seems obvious that that is a real possibility and that it's really presented to us by God. I don't know that the timing is right, but I know that the timing of our need is right. But what do I plan to do with the harvest when it comes? What do I plan to say to those who are here come January 8th? I don't know. Not yet. I won't know till I'm presented with the possibilities. So I need your prayers. We're getting ourselves up from where we have dwelt comfortably for a long time and going to a land which God will show us, a land of great possibilities. Let's do our best to be ready for those possibilities. That's my lesson for today.